Os, Os. Welcome to the Gentleman's Dojo podcast. I'm excited because today is going to be a special podcast. Uh, A, because it's my first episode, but B, because of the guest who I have on today. His name is Chris Kane, the one and only, the skilled sailor, as we call him in the dojo, as we all have dojo nicknames. But I'm really excited to have Chris here on our first podcast episode, just because I would say, is the prime example of being a badass student in the Gentleman's Dojo. So, Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate it, man. It's been one of my greatest honors of my life working for you, and I'll even say it like that. So happy to be here and happy to be a part of this moment for you, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, I appreciate it. And then just to give you context, this guy Chris has been pushing me. He's been like, Josh, you got something going. You got something different. Like you gotta be posting this, and just like anything else, life catches up, and a lot of transitions in my life this past year, and a lot of, and when you have an addition to your family, a lot of things change. But I think there's always an ever evolving process in our growth, and so since you pushed me harder, I was like, who else would it be that I would want on my show in the first episode except Chris Kane? So to give out the audience context, Chris, let's talk about a little bit. Let's talk about, I think today's main focus is to really get to understand your thought process, getting into the healing world, right? Especially as we know in the Gentleman's Dojo, we're creating a safe container for us to really do the inner work, where we haven't been given that opportunity majority of our lives, and we've never seen that by example majority of times in the men in our lives, right? So to give people the context, let's talk about where you were when we first met last year in August.
I was, to put it lightly, man. I mean, I was definitely in a place I was lost, like quite literally lost. I was living a life that I wasn't in alignment with.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of like felt that, walking day to day. I actually got introduced to you getting my hair cut from a guy that we both know. That gentleman, it's been a huge impact for me, actually. He's actually taught me a lot and said a couple of things that he's mentioned to me during our time together that is still stuck with me today. But he introduced us. I knew that I needed some work to do on myself, to be quite honest. And I knew that I needed to take this journey in order to kind of get the things that I wanted in life, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
I remember having like a thought. I actually talked with one of my friends who I haven't spoken with in a while, and I was kind of we were catching up a little bit. Um, just there was a period of time where I was full transparency here, right?
Yeah, the Gentleman's Dojo, just let you guys know, the listeners in the podcast, the Gentleman's Dojo is a safe container and a space for that. So you will be hearing a lot of vulnerability, not only in myself, but all our guests, because that is our intention. I think our truth in being able to speak upon the hardest things we deal with in battles we deal with internally, I think it gives us power when we're able to speak on it, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort, but that's why it's the dojo. It's a place for us to really learn and grow. So please dive into as much as you can, because I think the audience will feel that more. And I think, as you know, in being a dojo bro, it really makes a bigger impact in yourself and others.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I was just my behavior was not right. Just how I was acting, how I was behaving, some of the habits that I had, for sure. I started taking hard drugs casually. I wouldn't necessarily say that like I was addicted. I was just doing them. I'd be like, sure,
Yeah.
I'll just do that.
Right,
And
right.
I was living out of alignment,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
And I think I knew that. And, you know, one of the biggest goals that I have in life is to get married. I mean, it's the biggest goal that I have in my life. And I remember talking to my friend, as I was mentioning earlier, I had a moment to myself where I was like, would I want, one of my girlfriends or someone like my sister to marry somebody like me? And the answer was no, absolutely not. So, anyway, so that's kind of why I decided to kind of take this path. And
Yeah.
yeah, it has been a very, very, very challenging path, but
Yeah.
and it's not over by any means. It's not like as I sit here today, it's like it's done.
Mhm.
It's an ongoing process. I'm fully aware of that, but um, I just knew that I had a lot of work to do on myself, and that's why I did this. So
I love it. Yeah, and that's a good point. What I really want to highlight there is that I think a lot of us men don't talk about enough about like what I call being a lover boy, right? Like you really just you genuinely want to get married. And I think in our conversations with a lot of guys in our friends group, a lot of guys don't want to really talk about like, man, I really want to marry this person, or I'm really looking and I'm really committed to finding, a person. I think it's just I think a lot of us guys tend to brush that off. And I don't think a lot of females realize that. There is a lot of genuine guys out there who truly are looking for love and in all the right reasons, in a sovereign way, as we will say, where it's not out of alignment with you. You don't become codependent, but a lot of us guys are really looking for that long-term relationship for sure.
yeah, 100%. And I think, that's something that we talked about quite a bit in the gentleman's dojo was sort of that process. I mean, maybe you can kind of walk through that sort of the outline and the evolution of how that kind of happened. But that's just something that I learned from your course and taking that journey with the other fellow dojo members. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, okay, cool. So that's where you were when we first met,
Mhm.
right? And then we started getting into, then we started, it was so cool how it happened. Shout out to Gabe, who just put you on and say, maybe you should connect with Josh and see what it is. And I was actually hosting a vision board party, a conceptual vision board party that night. And then you showed up as a student ready to learn. And then we got a chance to meet in person. And then from there, we started working together. And when I say we started working together, I think and I mentioned this too in the beginning, is when I work with anyone, I'm literally just a mirror to reflect back on your own power and capability, right? Because I think that's what's missing a lot in a lot of the personal development realm. And I was caught in this is that we get too caught up on the leader, right? And we start idolizing people, right? So like when we talk about celebrities, we talk about Chris Kane, Joshua Munoz, right? We don't have to put another name, but we're conditioned because growing up we saw every hero movie, and we have this kind of energetic feeling that someone's going to come and save us. And what I like to promote and how I live by is you have to save yourself. So tell the audience a little bit about how that process was when I'm just reflecting mirror back, right? Because I think a lot of people can, if I categorize myself as a coach, if I categorize as myself as a, life coach or healer, eh, it'll be doing myself a injustice because I think I'm just a guide. And how I guide is by example, and how I guide is by shining my light and to show others how I shine my light so they can learn how to shine their own light. So talk about how was that different from what you're used to in the past, because you weren't brand new. You have the experience of like personal development. You were doing really well and you do really well in your career. You're a good looking person. You're in good shape, right? So it's like tell the audience a little bit about how that process was when I really held the mirror up and held you accountable for your own thoughts and processes.
Boy, yeah, you're right. I mean, on the surface, I kind of had I don't want to say a cozy life, but I worked for a very reputable company. Was getting paid a lot, a good salary in my opinion. A lot of career trajectory opportunities. I take care of myself, but I just didn't feel right,
Mhm.
you know, inside. Um, I've had a lot of personal circumstances
Yeah.
through my life. I've had a lot of loss. Just to kind of, if you don't mind, I'll
Yeah,
share.
yeah, please, we'd love to for you to go like take us because I shine the mirror on you.
Yeah,
Let the audience know kind of what has been your journey that led you up to why you may be feeling lost, and why you may be feeling at a point where, wow, my life in all these areas is going well. That's what society conditioned us to say that it's going to go well. So if you do this well, your life is great. But tell us a little bit about your story and how that you realize that this is not everything. There's more to than just the physical and mental. We have something like the spiritual.
yeah. So I grew up in a very chaotic household. All right. It just was, quite simply put, it was chaotic. And it's very loud. Um, Police was at the house a lot. I lost both my parents to, we'll call it alcoholism. Um, I lost two of my best friends at different points of my life. My
What
grand
ages? What ages were the friends you lost?
So I believe I was 16, 15 to
Okay,
16
so it's teenage
when,
years.
yeah, when one of my friends there, both of their names were Josh. Yeah, Josh
Wow!
Josh Patra. He was in a car accident. Um, anyway, still think of him today. Yeah,
Shout out to Josh. Damn, that's crazy. I didn't realize his name was Josh.
and his family, Nicole and Brittany. So, anyway, and then I lost one of my greatest friends ever. His name was Josh Kohler. He was 28. I believe it was on his birthday. Um, and yeah, so anyway, so I've experienced a lot of loss in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And I always felt like very beaten down spiritually. That's kind of how I felt. Just kind of like flatlined. I was kind of like a dud, I guess. You know? Anyway, so I was growing up, I didn't really have a clue what I wanted to do in life. I kind of went to college just to go.
Mhm.
I actually lost my father like towards the end of my college career, so just making it through college was a big accomplishment for me.
Yeah.
After college, no clue what I wanted to do in my life, so I just took the first job that I got offered, and then that kind of led me to at 3M was the company that I work for. It's a really great company, great organization, best job I've ever had in my life. And so, forever I wanted to work there, and I got an opportunity to work there, and uh, moved down here to Arizona. My favorite city in the world is Scottsdale
Yeah. Yeah.
that I've been to. So I'm really grateful for that. And then, was a part of a large layoff recently. And anyway, so I'm kind of in this like transitionary period of my life currently. But back to your question about like, so that's a little bit about me and my
Mhm.
journey, what brought me here. Um, but that mirror perspective, I mean, for a while I was angry. And
Mhm.
so I would experience that.
Mhm.
I don't know how to describe it really, but I would experience it in the outside physical realm.
Mhm. Yep. Correct.
Right? And it took a while to kind of get over that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
This sense of like, I always felt like people were just staring at me and people were
Mhm.
watching me, and it was kind of like an uneasy feeling. It used to bug me, and I used to talk with you about it a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so anyway, that was one of my biggest challenges for
Yeah.
sure.
And but then you realize like it's the hardest thing to realize. And I think a lot of people in this space, it's actually opposite of just like yoga, meditating. They think like, it's all good, feel good type of work, but there's nothing that feels good when you realize you've been responsible for what you've been experiencing in the outside world,
Yes.
right? So a lot of our resentment and things we hold on to, like, damn, I can't believe this happened to me. But then there's a point of accountability where you have to realize, like, well, you know what? These experiences keep happening to me because I'm projecting either the experiences or I'm just perceiving things a specific way. Right. So like a lot of things may be not even happening, but because we think, right, it's just like that feeling of, you know, this is not the best example, but you know, when I was a little kid, I used to rob a lot in the stores, the corner stores, and that was kind of thing. You kind of buy one candy, sneak one into your pocket, but the
Yeah.
feeling of you just stealing something, you always feel like someone's watching you, right? But because I feel like I'm stealing something, I feel like someone's always watching me, someone's always trying to say, "Hey, so like that's how I felt, as a kid with cops. It's like we were always doing illegal hood rat stuff, so when you think of cops, you get scared, and then it's like you never like the association with cops is not good. But that's just an example of just how we majority of us don't realize that the outside world, a lot of it is a reflection of the inner perspective and the inner world of what's going in our emotions, feelings, and thoughts. And it is scary to start seeing that in reality. And I think that's the hardest part is to not give up. So tell us why you didn't give up at that point, because I feel like it's when I was experiencing that process too, it was very difficult. So what was your thought process so the audience can hear like, oh, okay, if I'm experiencing my own self at a higher level, how can I not quit and not give up on myself and stay aligned on the mission?
It's you got to be honest with yourself, man. You know what I mean? Like I was for a period of time, I'd be like, I would give people dirty looks,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just would. I'd be like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just staring like back at people. I was always like fighting back.
Mm,
You know what I mean? That's not the right thing to do because you're just going to get that in return, right? And
mm,
people aren't going to trust you and all that kind of thing, right? So it's just kind of like honest self-talk was a big part of it.
mm.
It's that feeling of like for me it was like if I felt that wrenching gut feeling, I knew something was off and it all started with me, right? Why I never gave up. I actually have something written down in my phone. I have a list. I have a conscious creation list, right?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Anyway, but it all kind of goes back to the goals that I have in my life, right? And
Hmm.
it's like, how bad do you want it?
Hmm.
Right? How bad do you want all the things that you want, Chris? I mean, are you willing to go through all of this in order to get that?
Yeah.
And the answer is always yes.
Hmm.
So I think it's just, if there's one thing about me, I have perseverance and resilience and that's I just can't give up. It's not in my nature.
I love it. Yeah, and I think that's the biggest point to tell, like, to keep highlighting the fact that this personal journey, like personal growth, and more spiritual journey, which for me, when I bring up spiritual or spirituality in this podcast, it's really the relationship you have with yourself, right? Because I think, as we know now, is that our relationship with ourself, our relationship with our discernment and our feeling is really our superpowers, right? So you did ignore that feeling inside and you say, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. But it's also realizing this journey ain't the easiest, and that's why it's the gentleman's dojo, because of my karate background. Becoming a black belt, it's all cool, but going through the process is not so cool because you got to constantly show up. You can't not show up, right? And even when I started pursuing my jujitsu career, after being a black belt, I'm going, wait a minute, I can't even use my punch and kicks anymore in jujitsu. I got to really be a white belt, and being a white belt means you're gonna get beat up, you're gonna learn, but you're gonna have a fun time doing it. And if you stay committed to the path, it's gonna become easier for you to overcome the hardship.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it doesn't become easier. It becomes
Right.
easier to overcome the hardship. Because even now, as we talk about, right, even the triggers and the stuff we deal with now and ongoing, it's still just as difficult, but it becomes easier to overcome the hardships.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good way to put it, man. It's like this concept of a higher self. I really like that. It's one thing I learned from this experience. I was pretty new to this whole spiritual development, personal development. It's all kind of like happened rather quickly for me, but I
Yeah.
really got into it. And this idea of like future self, right? Having many layers of your highest self that lead you to your future self, right? And
Yeah.
each time that you go and experience something, um, maybe you don't do well in that moment, but you'll have an opportunity to handle that moment again, and you'll have that, your higher self will overcome it. That's kind of how I think about it. So um, anyway, I have something on my list here called the 10 Chris Commandments.
Yeah, let's go over that.
One of the things that you said to me, every day is game day.
Hmm.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Every time that I walk out of my house, I gotta be on it, and it's a really good opportunity for me to prove to myself, like, hey, I'm in alignment here.
Mm.
Um, so anyway,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah. Every day is game day is my favorite terminology because I think a lot of people, and I'll speak for myself. A lot of what I used to do in the past, it would be it would be events, right? It would be when I did ayahuasca, I don't even know how many times. It was like during the ceremony, I was so elevated and so wise, and the medicine helped me. Or if I was doing, mushrooms and Sedona, and I'm thinking like, oh, I'm so enlightened. And then a lot of people in this space think that spirituality is like a weekend hobby and something that we pick up and we put down. In actuality, when you're developing the relationship with yourself, it's an everyday thing. So like my thought process and why every day is game day is because every day is game day. This is not a practice. This is we're really experiencing these experiences. And when you don't treat if you treat days like practice, what tends to happen is we tend to ignore our intuition, and we tend to do things that are out of alignment for what we truly want. So that's why I love, shout out to Marconics that allowed me to really. Marconics is a ascension practice more than a healing modality, but it got me focused on really just being honest with myself, and also realizing that this is not a hobby, that anything you do can shift timelines and shift, and anything out of alignment that doesn't fit where you feel right, it can throw your whole life in the twirl. So I think it's important to. I'm glad you brought up your 10 commandments, and I want you to keep going through the rest. But I'm
yeah,
glad that's number one because I think it's very important to remember it's every day. Every day we're experiencing this human experience. There's a reason why we're here. Like think about our time is all relevant. We have a short or long time here, whatever your perspective is towards it. But we have a allotted time for us here. And I think it's for us to specifically learn something. And that's always my thought process on it. And that's why I love the dojo, because even as an instructor, I'm showing up every day as a student.
yeah, you did do that, and during the gentleman's dojo course, you participated, which I appreciated, and I'm sure all the other gentlemen in there did too.
Yeah. And that was my second time going through it. I had to participate beforehand. And shout out to my team members, Karina and Crystal. They were the ones who helped me. The Gentleman's Dojo curriculum was written by some badass, high level women who are very in tune with just in general what they dealt with too. It's very beautiful when we're able to really team up masculine and feminine and come together to figure out what do we really truly want. And I think, there's so many masculine and feminine things out there that it's like, well, let's just talk to the women, what they want in men, what they dealt with and their traumas, and let's talk to men about what they dealt with and their traumas and what they go through. And then to realize we all want the same thing, right? But we we don't show up that way because we show up more because our traumas and our hurt. So it's like we both want the same thing. We want love, and then we fight and pretend we don't want love, but we never really been learned how to be in love. And then we realize it's all about us having a beautiful and loving relationship with ourselves. And that's the only way you can have a divine union is by two whole people coming together. No more, none of this more, no more of this half stuff. Like you make up for this, you make no. We're not doing that no more. That's outdated, and let's throw that away.
It's powerful, man.
Is there? So let's go. Let's keep going through your commandments. I love
All
to.
right, cool. So 10 Chris commandments. That's what it's called. And I have them when I lay down, I see it. When I wake up, I see it. Be your highest self. Stay focused on the vision you have for yourself. Act as if it's already yours. Be intentional. Don't play small. Trust your gut. Practice observational thinking.
Mhm.
Be mindful of the words you use. It's one of the biggest lessons I've learned from working with you, Josh. Every day is game day. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chris 10, bro, it's crazy. Like hearing you, I get chills every time. Hearing you say these things is incredible because a lot of what in the list that you wrote down, you embodied, and you're living it. You know, you're a living example, and that's why I wanted you as the first guest on the podcast because you're. I mean, short period of time. We just met last August,
Yeah,
bro. That feels like lifetimes ago
it
when
does.
you're really doing the work because it was it was lifetimes ago. It was the old Chris. It wasn't really the true Chris. You know, a lot of times, like I always say, it's not Chris 2.0, it's Chris 1.0. We've been acting like we know who we are, but a lot of times we're so lost. And I think diving into the relationship with ourselves, we really truly develop who we truly are. And that brings a sense of calm confidence. And that's why I learned a lot in martial arts and what a lot of the people in the dojo, the gentleman's dojo, learned because they're like, wait a minute, I'm really confident in myself and I'm calm because we understand the masculine understands that you got to be strong. You got to be strong enough to be gentle, you
Yeah.
know? And that's why I always pray. I pray every day, every man in the world could be strong enough that they could be gentle. You know how many times I always think about like I could whip this guy's ass if I get mad, right? That's part of being, you know, when you learn how to fight and you know how to defend yourself, it comes with a lot of responsibility, right? It's like, you know, like it'll be much easier for me just to whip this guy's ass instead of me dealing with I gotta be calm. It's much easier for me to yell out and speak back to my partner, right? It's so much easier for me to get frustrated with my son, my 4 month little baby. But I think you got to be. There's a point where you got to be strong enough to take the gentle approach.
That's powerful, man. Yeah, for sure. Being calm in chaos. Yeah.
Yes,
That's
sir.
that's something that is a daily practice for me for sure. I definitely have to say that there's a lot of different triggers that I experience
Yeah.
throughout a week, throughout a day. I'm not perfect, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna be perfect, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm a human. Um, but being calm in those situations has definitely been a practice that I've had to do. So I resonate with what you say.
Yeah. I love that. And then so let's talk about that then, because we're not. No one's perfect, and I think that's another thing for us guys. I don't ever remember hanging out with like a group of friends or like guys. Like we're really. I don't want to say this. Um, on the surface level, a lot of us we act dumb because I don't think a lot of us are dumb. I think society has conditioned us and programmed us to like act dumb when we're kind of like chilling out with the boys, right? But in reality, we all know we're not perfect, and we all know we have things we're working on. So like how were you able to start to understand what triggers were and then your experience on how did you get it what tools do you use to overcome those triggers to be able to shift that perspective.
Mhm. I got introduced to triggers, the concept of a trigger, once I started. I mean, I kind of knew what a trigger was, right? But
Mhm.
like once I started to like understand it in this sort of dynamic, it
Yeah.
kind of changed for me. I mean, I'll share one of my biggest triggers. I'll share my biggest trigger.
Yeah.
My biggest trigger is feeling like I screwed up.
Mm.
I kind of grew up with this sense of like I would come home sometimes
Yeah.
and um I'd be like, why is my dad mad? What did I do? You
Yeah.
know, and I kind of walked around on eggshells a lot my whole life. And I don't know, that sensation is kind of carried on with me. So anyway, so there's times where like I go out in the world and maybe I do something or might interpret something a certain way, and I'll have this rush of like adrenaline, it'll feel like, or like
Mm.
anxiety. And
Yeah.
it's like, you know, but I think, how do I overcome that? It's just having self-awareness, like, hey, I am being triggered. You didn't do anything. You've taught me this concept of giving yourself grace, which I think is what
Mm.
you're getting at here a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, but giving myself grace and forgiving myself and having that self-love and learning and developing self-love for myself, so that when I have those moments, I can talk to myself in a way that's a little bit more nurturing and that's a little bit more understanding, and I can calm myself down when those moments happen.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I'm glad you brought this up. This is perfect. I'm glad you brought it up because it covers our second pillar in the dojo, which is awakening the inner boy. Right. And I think it's important because I don't want people to miss this. I don't want the audience to miss this because this is huge. You had the sensation, and your biggest trigger you were dealing with, it was a reflection from what you dealt with as a child. Right. So in the Gentleman's Dojo, we spent a good amount of time in this on the second pillar, which is awaken an inner child, because what you said is true. Giving yourself grace, giving yourself forgiveness is important, but we gotta first go back and unbox where do those feelings come from, right? Because I agree, majority of my adult hardships, my triggers, even my triggers to this day, is all majority from what I experienced as that little boy. So uh tell us, what was your experience in the dojo taking that time to do that, right, where we got a chance to go back? I know in the dojo we uploaded all our pictures of us when we were kids, but what did that how did that doing that work kind of help you with your perspective now?
Learning about yourself, I guess, it's kind of simple like that, but like it all comes back for me, it's how am I talking to myself? How am I speaking to Chris, right? And I remember one of the things that you said in one of the tools that you did is you made us put a picture of us when we were like a baby as our thumbnail picture. And you said, how would you talk to him?
Mm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to that, just, one of the exercises that we did is we told our story, right? Our hardships, like to a bunch
Yeah.
to the guys,
Yeah.
and learning what my triggers were and where they came from, right? Allowed me to be educated about myself. So when I come across these situations, I can talk to myself, Chris, this is coming from this, don't speak to yourself like this. You have you're a little softer to yourself. I was
Mm-hmm.
always my biggest critic, I was always
Mm-hmm.
very hard on myself. It's something I still struggle with for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I've lightened up on myself because of all those practices for sure, Josh.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Yeah, I think the downfall for a majority of us men is that we carry insecurities deep, deep in our hearts. And then because of the program and the condition of us men, we spend middle school, high school, even elementary school guarding our insecurities because of just the conditioning and how we thought what it was to be a man, right? And I think you said it right really well. Like I think that's important, and everything that we've done in the dojo and how I set it up is because I've done the same practices. And even when I was doing the session with you guys, it was like it feels good to just go back and experience your story without judgment. I think that's the biggest part, right? It's like we're reflecting from the past, not from a lens of judgment and blame, because that doesn't solve anything. That puts that lowers you down, your vibration anyways, lowers your frequency. I think we were studying ourselves to really bring back the past and bring into the now, because a majority of us, everyone's usually dealing with this. Every human is usually living out with what they dealt with in the past. And no one ever spent any time thinking about what was their actual story and what they've gone through. So imagine how powerful that would be for us men if we all were able to truly talk about our stories, and even the video I talked about, like, oh man, like I really had no confidence in high school. When I posted that, people were like, man, Josh, like you seem mad confident in high school. It's crazy to think, like one of my cousins said that on Facebook. She was like, man, like Josh, you seem so confident in high school. You're like, you never know what people are dealing with. I'm like, that's so true. And if I was the one who seemed confident, like I was more just an extrovert naturally and talkative. So like people took that as like I'm being confident, but I would just talk my way out of everything.
They kind of use that as a shield. I think we talked about a little bit, right?
Yeah, we use it as a shield. And that's it, right? It's like if we don't go back and realize what we've gone through in our past and why we got to this point now, we will never see that there's a shield around our hearts. So it does give you grace, and it does give you patience with yourself and forgiveness when you're able to say, you know what? I understood why I put the shield here, and I'm aware there's a shield here. But how do I start letting that shield go? You know?
So, so I've heard you say this before, you talk about tools, right?
Mhm.
And what you just said there, right? This idea of a shield over your heart, right? This idea of doing inner child work to then talk to yourself differently. Those to me, those are the tools that I have learned from taking your course to then implement into my life. And I just kind of wanted to make that clarification because I would be a little bit confused at first when you talked about tools, but
Mhm.
now that I have clarity now on a lot of this. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that up because I it's 1:44 right now too. It's funny. I agree. I think those are the best tools we can use is our perspective, our intuition, and our thoughts. A little bit about my past. When I got into spirituality, my tools were like using a medium, getting my cards read, right? Because I felt so much better. I didn't have to work, I didn't have to think, or I didn't have to trust my gut, which is scary being a guy who never learned how to trust anything. Right. So I'm like, my tools were mediums, my tools were cards I would pick daily, right? Oh, I picked this card, so now my relationships are going to get better. My tools were plant medicines. Oh, I did 40 bowls of ayahuasca. Now I'm wise, right? I sound healing. Oh, sound healing, yoga, meditate, group meditation. And what I found is that any tool that we choose outside of ourselves gives our power away. There's a reason why it says sovereign as F on the shirt, right? There's a reason why it's part of the brand and the merch is because when you're sovereign, you realize you are your own source of power. So the reason why I'm glad you brought that up because I forget, I see that naturally. These are tools I use, and that tools are perspectives and awareness and raising your consciousness. And I think when I started letting go of those tools, like bro, like if people knew me, I mean, I lived in Sedona for a year. Like I was doing cacao ceremonies, rocking every bead that heals everything. I would bring family and friends to the stores in Sedona every time they come. And every time they come, I'll get, oh, let me get more crystals and let me get more things that help me with money and business and relationships. And although a lot of those crystals carry a specific energy, and although all those tools did serve me, so I'm not talking bad about them. I'm just asking you to think higher. So although all those things served its purpose for me, when I started using my own intuition and true sovereignty with looking within, then that's when everything started unwrapping, right? That's when I started really understanding the power. That's when I really felt my own power, right? Because my power is not on these crystals. My powers were not on these sound baths. There weren't in these plant medicines. It wasn't these shamans. It wasn't these big business gurus. It wasn't these entrepreneurs, and it wasn't these cold baths, right? It wasn't the breath work I did with a group of 300 people. It was my own power, So I think I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, when I reference tools here, a lot of tools will be exercises or thought processes we could think about and we can utilize moving forward, And I think about it as kids, we have imaginations. Tools for them were imaginations. So I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because that is very important on this podcast and moving forward. I'm only going to be talking about stuff that keeps you sovereign and keeps you aligned with your highest power. Sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. I learned all those tools from working with you, and they've been things I use daily, moment to moment. So they are no joke, powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And then so let's talk about where are so we understood where you were, your thought process and your growth and your progress. Like where are you now and where do you see yourself moving forward?
Where am I now? Right now, I'm still sort of in ascension. That's kind of what my focus is.
Mhm.
I know what that means. I know you know what that means. But I'm really focused on my ascension path.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, just pr practicing good daily habits,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Routines, thought processes, just kind of developing that spiritual health, which, helps the mental health and physical health, right? It all kind of flows. So that's kind of where I'm at currently. I'm kind of in a transitionary period as we were discussing from a career
Yeah.
perspective, right? So,
Which we talked about that perspective, how that happened. You got let go of a job, right? But a few months before you got let go of this job, you were telling me that you don't feel fully aligned with this career anymore.
it never did.
So it's crazy where we think life comes in and it shakes it up and we go, oh my God, it's an earthquake. It's like, no, this is a crystal ball shaking up. So the things that fall in place are really meant to fall in place. And you're the one who created the experience because you started aligning with something that you truly want. And when you align with something you truly want, everything else that's not aligned with that tends to fall apart, right? So relationships, friends, careers, people, places, they tend to change and we go, what the heck's going on? But it's like you're aligning with what's right with you.
Life is happening for me, not to me, right?
Spitting bars,
Yep.
spitting bars.
Yep. So that's kind of where I'm at currently. I'm kind of in a transitionary period, right? Um, where do I see myself in the future? Living in abundance, living in love, peace. I told you my biggest goal in life
Mm.
is to find that person, to get married, um, to have a family, all that stuff. That's my biggest goal in life. So I gotta turn into that person, and grow into that. And so that's where my focus is currently right now.
I
And
love it.
yeah,
I love it. I think that's what we talked about a lot in the Gentleman's Dojo is part of being a gentleman, right? It is having that foresight, that thought process of like, wait a minute, I'm going to be this type of person because it's what I feel mostly aligned with, but also allows me to show up as the person I want to show up in a relationship, in a career, as a father, if I'm starting a family, right? So like everything people are like, oh, Josh, I always knew, why I get a lot? People go, Josh, I always knew you could be a great dad. But the reason why they're saying that is because I thought about how do I want to act when I have a family and how am I going to keep my legacy going? Right. And then it's not my legacy, right? But like how am I going to keep this going? And I always thought about that way before I had kids. So now that I have a son, it just feels right. It makes sense why we're here, you know? So I think it's important for us guys to really start asking ourselves, how are we going to show up in the most beloved way for ourselves? And that is going to help us show up in all areas of life, you know?
Yes, sir. Big
Yes,
time.
sir. Cool. Well, now, Chris, as we're about to wrap up, I have a question for you. If you can give advice for men who are either in the process of doing the healing work or are new to stepping into doing the work of just of learning from their past, learning from themselves, and do the inner healing, what advice would you give men?
Be patient. That is a loaded statement, but like when you think you got it, you got to be patient. And when you think you got it, you got to be patient. You got to give yourself grace. And I think before you, if you haven't stepped into this sort of path yet, just understand that it's going to be a very difficult path because, as you say, Josh, you have been the one that's always been in your own way. And I think
Mm,
realizing that is difficult and it takes, it's that breaking that ego down.
mhm.
And that's hard to do. And it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of honest self-reflection. Ugly honest is kind of what I like to say. You
Mhm.
got to be like very ugly honest with yourself. But I think that, if you haven't started, just be ready for the biggest challenge you're going to have in your life. And if you're in the process of it, be patient and continue to give yourself grace. And you got this.
You heard it, ladies and gentlemen, from the one and only Chris Kane. And in the dojo, we have nicknames for everyone. And Chris got the skilled sailor because he goes with the seas and he's skilled at what he does. But he also, I really appreciate you because you're really showing up as a student. And I think that's one thing I've seen with the most, I mean, any realm, even in my business realm in the past and even realms now, like the most powerful people are the ones who are humble enough to put in the work. And I really appreciate your willingness to dive in and do like step in to your highest self for you specifically, you know? So I really appreciate your hard work and your consistency of doing the inner work. And, and I call it, you're fairly new to this stuff. So it's like to see the progress you've had. I mean, it really gives me hope seeing people like you do the work because I gives me really hope because I really believe that what we can do with this gentleman's dojo is really shift the trajectory of how us men show up in the world. So we're really showing up as our higher selves.
Yeah, man, it's been one of the greatest privileges of my life working with you. I mean, you changed my life. All this process has literally changed my life. So thank you for putting yourself out there for, and your guidance and putting this curriculum together. Um, and also holding me accountable to the highest degree and not letting me squeak by with anything, and I appreciate that from you. So, anyway, I just wanted to say that. And also, like I told you, Josh, I think you got something really special here. And, I see a lot of really great things coming from this. So please keep this going.
Yeah, you got it. Well, this is the first episode, ladies and gentlemen. We are dropping in first episode. Yeah, I'm just gonna figure this out as we go. And just like anything else, you gotta just throw yourself out there. And I've been through a lot of transitions this past year, and everything's leading me back to continue to do what I'm doing here. But just natural life gets distracted. The ego comes in. It's like, wait, Josh, I could get back into marketing and make a killer, and make the money. And but it's just like I think right now how I'm living it is for impact, and the money is important, very important for sure. But it's the impact that of me staying in alignment for what I'm doing. And I really appreciate for you keep nudging me on this, and I really appreciate your willingness as a student, and maybe now you're a teacher. I know now you're certified in Marconics, which is one of the I think most profound energy updates and upgrades you can have in your human body. And definitely reach out to Chris if you have any questions in that realm, which will be cool and badass. But I appreciate you, Chris, for being the first guest on the Gentleman's Dojo podcast, and there will definitely be more.
Great honor, my friend.
Os.
Oops.